Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Data Ideas podcast. This is Dustin Shimmick, the host, and I am joined by Isaac Tucker Raspberry for tonight's episode, which is episode 54 of the Data Ideas podcast. Isaac, how did you get into the data and analytics field? What's your background?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on the show. I really do appreciate it. But I started out in data and analytics a little bit before it was called data and analytics, back when it was like business intelligence. I studied economics in undergrad, and I took an econometrics class. I did not do well in it, but that was my entry point to programming. After that, I ended up at Goldman Sachs right up out of undergrad in 2018. And, I got a report. I wanted to figure out, okay, how do I make myself a little bit more like my colleagues? And I decided to plot the amount of the portfolio versus the number of clients in that portfolio, and then tag it to an employee. I took it to my boss and said, how do I get over there? How do I get to the top right-hand quadrant? And he said, where'd you get this from? And I said, I put it together. It turns out that wasn't a report it wasn't something that he had ever done with that report before. And that started me down the route. It was curiosity about Excel, curiosity about putting together graphs that people could look at, and then bringing that to them, and then trying to make my own plan for advancing in my career. That honestly started the rest of the route.
That was the spark.
Okay. That was the spark.
Very cool. Awesome. And interesting, too, that you have an economics undergrad. I know when we had our first meeting, I can't remember if that came out, but I actually have an economics undergrad as well. And it's interesting that I meet several folks, I feel like, in the field that had the economics undergrad. When you were doing that, I'm curious, did you ever think that you would do that with the intention of going into data and analytics specifically?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Same with me. Yeah.
I studied economics and Africana studies. The goal was admittedly to work the right brain and the left brain. I kind of wanted to weave those two things together and then look at society writ large. So I did not have a plan to get into it. I honestly was looking for a toolkit when I did get into it. That project I mentioned before.
Yeah.
While I was doing it, my company decided to put on a free boot camp. I could not take it though because I was doing the project. So I went home and decided I'm going to look up business intelligence tools. The freest one was SQL, and that started me down the road. I started getting ads. I was kind of too scared to take the plunge, but my incredible wife was also getting the ads on Instagram and said, you need to take this class so that I stop getting these ads. I signed up about a week or two later, and It just catapulted everything from there. So it was really just getting the tools that I wanted. It wasn't, I wanted to be in the industry.
Cool. Awesome. And welcome to Carmelo in the chat. For those listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, we're actually recording this live the evening before it's being published out. And so we've got some comments coming in from folks on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you are joining live, feel free to say hello in the chat. Always good to see who's joining the live broadcast. So Isaac, that's a great introduction. What's your favorite thing, would you say, about being in the data industry these days?
I think there's going to be two parts to that. The first is that this toolkit is applicable throughout a bunch of different industries, which really makes an entry-level role easy to obtain. You honestly just get to be able to stack those things. It's like, can you run a query in SQL? Can you access the database? Can you get things set up? Absolutely. It also, in my mind, analytics serves as one of those fundamental skill sets that you need before you can do advanced engineering at scales. You need to at least download the data set, look around, see what's null, maybe map it, graph it a little bit, and definitely before data science, well before data science, which then puts me at the beginning of the pipeline and, in my mind, ensures a little bit more job security. And so I love those two things about data analytics. However, I think that the offside to the baseline set of skills is that it's kind of seen as maybe a more junior role. And I think that communication and industry knowledge kind of helps you move along. So those baseline skills can kind of be table stakes when you're in a room full of analytics professionals. But if you're embedded in a team like a financial planning and analysis team, then you're the analytic person. And it really is helpful because then you can travel between the business and what they need and then the analytics tools themselves. So I like the way that it helps me be a team player and kind of just throw my hat in anywhere and then be able to get in hit the ground running, pick up the tool, the terminology as I go. But that's what I love. That's what I love about it.
And you've worked already for some of the top firms. I mean, you've worked for Netflix, you've worked for Goldman Sachs. This is really impressive, and I think other folks who would love to learn kind of what strategy you took to get hired at companies like that. What was it, that you would say from a strategy perspective really got you in to those organizations?
Well, first, I want to be extremely transparent. Neither one of those roles was technically in data and analytics. My role
Okay.
was in operations, which
plot
is
thickens. Okay.
Mhm. And then Netflix was in compensation.
Okay.
The Goldman Sachs team, I actually went to a career day in undergrad with my high school. They ultimately told us you could come across the bridge. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, so across the bridge
Sure.
was New York. And they said you could come across the bridge and learn about Goldman Sachs if you'd like to. I went, and their HR department looked at my resume, and I was not up to snuff. They gave me a bunch of advice in an email, sent it to me, and then told me to get back to them when I finished it. I changed my major to actually the econ. It was a minor up to that point. I redid my resume, I sent it in, and then they told me to apply to their undergrad program, to one of their boot camps. I did that. They told me everything that I needed to know, and then they asked me to apply for an actual summer internship. That ultimately led me to a full-time role at Goldman Sachs out of undergrad. I tried to negotiate the offer. They do not negotiate with undergrads. But my advice to everyone is to try. But that's how I got into Goldman. That one was my network. I trusted people that my network introduced me to. And that second and third connection really helped push me down the line. Netflix, on the other hand, that one was completely about being open-minded. When they contacted me, they reached out through LinkedIn. I had not submitted an application, interestingly enough, and they said, we think your analytics skills could be really great on this compensation team. We want you to be a compensation analyst. I responded back to the recruiter, I'm not a compensation analyst, but if you need an analytics professional, I will be a data analyst. They said, we think you should reconsider. I said, no. And then they said, you should absolutely reconsider, but the door is open if you do. I read through the email later that evening and realized it was Netflix. I did not realize that at the beginning. And so I ran back to my inbox and asked them, I would absolutely love to interview and hear you out. And it turned out that it was a lot more data analytics than not. And I went down that route. The interview process for Netflix is very particular. That is a whole other story unto itself. But on the one hand, it's being open-minded. I think both of them speak to being open-minded.
Right.
So I'd say that's kind of the superpower here. Applying tools wherever I can, being open to my network, giving me advice, being open to new people that I meet, giving me advice and saying that they see something that I don't. I think that those are some of the things that really helped me get my foot into those doors.
Cool. And do you think that taking these roles that weren't like technically data analytics roles, but had data and analytics as a component to the role at well-respected organizations, do you think that experience was a good springboard to getting into a more formal data and analytics role down the road?
Absolutely. So the Netflix role actually came after me being a full-time data analyst. But prior to that, I was honestly on a financial planning and analysis team as an FP&A analyst. My interests have always been, actually, I have a really good friend that I just finished visiting, and he told me in undergrad, and I think I've held on to it since, do you want to win or do you want them to know that you won? Those are two different things. And I translate that over into the career by saying, do you want the title or do you want to do the things?
Sure.
Both of them are equally important. If you want to apply to a senior data analyst role, it would be extremely helpful if you have previously been a data analyst. And sometimes recruiters exactly want that story. On the flip side, though, early on in my career, I just wanted to use one or two more tools. I didn't need the formal title. I said, I'll be an operations analyst. I will be an FP&A analyst, but I need to use SQL, but I need to use Python, but I need to use Power BI. If those are opportunities that I can obtain here for my portfolio of experience, then I would absolutely love to take the opportunity on. And I at the time, I would just make the caveat, I have this experience in finance, or I have this experience in data, or I am interested in what you do, even if I don't have experience in it. So just cobbling together that story until I was able to say, I have this collection of experiences that actually fits underneath a data analyst. Maybe you should make me a data analyst. And I went down that route. So I definitely think it's helpful, but honestly, if I was a research analyst tomorrow, it would be perfectly fine. I am just interested in the tool set and novel and complex issues. Those are the two things. The title is not as important.
And now you have a senior analyst position today. As you think about your progression into that, senior analyst role, what would you point to as kind of, the one thing that got you? I'm sure there was a lot of things, but what was kind of one of the main things that got you into that senior analyst position?
I think that it's going to be, that's a tough one. I really want to say two, but I think that
we'll give you two.
Okay, then the two. Thank you. On the one hand, I'm going to say that it's moving jobs. I'm 29 years old. I've moved jobs a handful of times.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I've interned and volunteered and done fellowships as well. And so the portfolio of experience I've been able to obtain in that time has kind of been a little bit quicker than I think I would have otherwise if I had done just one full-time job, no fellowships, no internships, no volunteering, no part-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really one, just making the best use of my time and keeping extracurriculars. You get out of undergrad and you stop doing those things except for like a hobby here and there.
Right.
I still have hobbies, but like one or two of my hobbies is contributing to my professional background.
Right.
So that's number one, moving around. I think the second one is honestly going to be being able to do things or wanting to do things independently. In compensation, they just talk about that in terms of levels, but like those first few levels are the ability to do things independently. Before you even get into domain knowledge and then being able to set a vision and being able to set vision for others or supporting others, it's can you take direction and then work semi-independently? So do you have the grit to like figure out the system and figure out this issue? Or for me, my government contracting work right now, I have to go through a bunch of forms before I can even do my first query to be able to log into this system, log into that, get a VPN, and all those things happen prior. And so I kind of need to have the grit to go through those processes, go through them somewhat independently, and then bring those things up as kind of a mini project manager to my manager and say, hey, look, I'm trying to get our work done. Here are the things that are in our way. And then having the grit to take it from start to finish, I think that that's really helpful. So I'd say those two things, moving jobs and then being able to work fairly independently or as independently as possible. I don't want to give myself too much credit. My team is awesome. Some of my past teams have been really amazing too. So nobody does it alone, but you do need to be able to go some of it alone.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of folks have benefited from all of your learnings and expertise that you've accumulated along the way and the strategies you've taken. I'd like to switch gears for just a moment. You've mentored and coached probably hundreds of folks in the field, or folks that aspire to be in the field. Can you give us a feel for what are the kinds of things that folks are struggling with, kind of common themes that folks ask you about, and kind of what's the advice you give? Maybe just a couple examples, on how to overcome some of those things.
Absolutely. So I like leaning on the phrase, treating your job search like a job a lot, but I do think that it is, every catchphrase is lacking a little bit, but I think what it lacks is the ability to operationalize and then scale some of those pieces. So, if you decide I'm going to work 6 hours a day and that's going to be it, I think that that's great. But that's a plan. That's something that you can measure. I think that you need to take that to the rest of the jobs or to the rest of the job search. So when I am job searching, for example, I'm not just looking on LinkedIn. I'm checking a handful of job boards. I have a list of about 20 that I really like to go back to. That's number one. So, checking all of those sites in a given day might be the thing, or maybe one of them sends an email, but turning that job search component into something that I can operationalize and turn into a checklist so that I know I did the right thing or I did enough. a lot of people don't know if they are doing enough for their job search. I want to take that concern off of the table by operationalizing it and turning it into a checklist. I also don't subscribe to, this might get me in trouble, it might be a hot take, but I don't subscribe to writing a resume for each and every individual job. I don't have the bandwidth for it. I like looking for 10 to 15 jobs at the beginning of my job search, rewriting my resume in that direction, in that career direction, for something that makes me excited and for whatever my current set of priorities might be. And then as I'm applying for roles, I can just send those things out. I don't have to really retouch much, because if the job I'm applying for is anything like those first 15 that got me super excited, then I don't really need to update it again. Now, if it's not getting any bites, then there's definitely something that's wrong with my resume or with the way that I'm applying, and I need to retinker. But I'm only going to do that tinkering every once in a while. I don't have to do it every single day. And then if I'm looking at applying for an individual, for like a role, applying for that role is not the end point of that job. I like to then look for the manager for that role. I like to look for people on that team on LinkedIn. Beyond that, I like to follow the company. I'll look up the company a little bit. And if I can find anybody with the follow button that I don't have to send a connection request to,
right,
I can do that. And then the layer above that is sending a connection request. And I'll say, hey, I'm in this field. This is the kind of thing I'm doing. I found you because I was researching this company. Just wanted to get in touch with people that are similarly interested in data and analytics. And then that way I can create something of a ripple effect. Each time I touch a role, it splashes out into soft leads and soft networking. So that way, when I need a friend, it's not like I'm trying to connect with you the same day that I need the job.
Right.
I connect with you today, I want the job tomorrow. No, I connected with you 3 weeks ago. I sent you a welcome, like a hello note. And then once you accepted it and you didn't say anything, I sent you a note on top of that. So now I'm in the job interview process and you're getting back to me 2 weeks later. Right. And you're like, oh, I'm so sorry I missed it. And I'm like, don't worry about it.
Right.
But I like operationalizing the pieces to the job search so that I know I'm going through each one of the steps of the checklist. But that's kind of how that's one of the things I think people mess up. It's not creating a system around the different parts of the job search, because then you have to make a lot of small decisions each and every day. And people have decision fatigue. Presidents have decision fatigue. Managers have decision fatigue. You and I, we're going to have decision fatigue. Right. So I like to put that to the side as best as possible up front.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think a lot of good advice. I think, especially as it pertains to building that network and networking when you don't need a job and having a system for doing that, I think that's really important. I can't tell you, and I'm sure it's the same for you, how many messages I get from folks where, they're asking for help, and sometimes I know the folks, sometimes I don't, but they're asking for help and introductions, kind of on the day that they get let go from a job, or the day that they're starting a new job search, and it's I'm glad to help as best I can, obviously, in those situations. But I think what's good to remind folks right now is that, the time to get started is building that network is now. The time to start thinking about getting ahead of things is now, because if that situation, God forbid, comes up, you're going to be light years ahead if you've been investing in building that network already. And so I love some of the tactics that you shared. Do you think folks like that comes natural to people to build that network proactively, or is that something you spend a lot of time coaching folks on, like in your individual coaching sessions?
I spend a lot of time trying to get that across.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people I myself too am one of these types of people. Data analytics does not come naturally to me. I think I'm more on the people side. I like presentations. I like putting together graphs. I like talking over ideas. I like finding those nuances live and in conversation. And so networking is the thing that comes naturally to me. The thing that comes less naturally to me is doing data analytics for data analytics' sake. I'm not the person to put together 10 graphs just to play with the features. I want to talk to the person and figure out why they do or don't like what they do or don't like, and how they best ingest that information, and then go from there. So for me, the process that I just described and some of the other advice I give folks is really just like me stacking advice. I like a Swiss cheese, thinking of it like a sandwich. It might be because it's dinner right now, but I think of it as a sandwich. I take a Swiss cheese approach. No approach singularly has enough advice. But if I layer the cheese across the problem,
Yeah.
it'll cover all the other holes in each one of their gaps, and I can start to solve for stuff. But it does not come simply. And also, I find that people don't like the idea of kindness at scale,
Mhm.
or social networking at scale. It kind of comes off as if it's cold and heartless. And in my mind, I'm like, I
Mhm.
am doing each one of these thoughtfully, but I do have a system for the things that I'm trying to do. And that's okay. That is
Yeah.
perfectly fine. What gets measured gets managed, and hopefully managed well. And that's okay.
And you mentioned dinner. So you haven't had dinner yet. I have, but because you're in Pacific time, you're in California, I'm in Central time. I'm on to coffee actually because now I'm starting to get tired because it's getting, you know, later in the evening. It's only 7:30. I guess maybe it's kind of pathetic that I had to have a cup of coffee,
No,
but
I got two on the regular.
um in terms of are folks asking for help on or just I guess advice on like how to leverage AI tools in their job search and what's your thoughts on using AI in general, um
Mm,
just in terms of career advancement and finding your next role. What's your thoughts on leveraging AI tools?
mm. There's AI tools and there's AI tools for job search. When it
Yeah.
comes down to
Let's separate it out. Let's continue on the job search track since we were just talking about that. Leveraging AI tools for your actual job search, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it for your career.
absolutely. So when
Yeah.
it comes down to, hmm, actually, I really like the way that a podcast put it. I think it's Hard
Mhm.
Fork by the New York Times. They're a technology podcast that I think they go on weekly. But they described AI as forklift versus curls, versus like just an arm curl. I think the difference is, do you need to do something in large quantities? Do you need to do something that is going to take a lot of time? Um, and are you going to need to do that thing over and over and over again in large amounts? That usually requires a forklift. If you need to
Right.
lift 1,000 pounds 10 times, 10,000 times a day, or a couple thousand times a year, that's a
Hmm.
forklift. There's no real benefit in doing that by hand. However, if you're on the flip side of that and you need to lift 100 pounds and you're doing it because you're trying to carve one muscle or another, that's something that you need to do by hand. Now, when it comes down to the job search, kind of moving that logic over, if I want to write a cover letter, maybe the pieces or what needs to be included, maybe those things I could talk to ChatGPT or Claude or one of the AIs and ask them what needs to be included, or ask them, what do you think of the way that I wrote this piece? But the original idea, what I want to include, the accomplishments that I'm most proud of, that I can speak to the best, those things come from, not to get philosophical, but those things come from the soul. Those
Right.
things come from you and me.
Totally. Yeah.
The rhythm of how you and I move on a given day, those things are unique. And that's where I think, if you're going to ask it to update a bullet point, that's great. But if you're asking it to act like a career guidance person, asking it for resume advice, giving it your resume, and then telling it to use all of the advice that they just gave you on your resume, I think it's going to take all of the personality out of, maybe less so out of a resume, more so out of a cover letter for sure. And I think that there's some pieces that you should hold on to. But that's kind of how I feel about job searching in particular. Use it on specific pieces, double check it, and the moments before you're about to hit submit, those moments should be between you and your application
Hmm.
at that point.
Got it. Interesting. And when as you're coaching, other analysts or prospective analysts, um, I guess let's take the group of folks that they already have a hard skill set. They might already be
Mm,
in the role. What should they be thinking about in terms of skills for the future? You're in a role now, but you want to skate to where the puck is going. What do you think folks need to be thinking about from a skill development perspective? Could be AI related, might not be. Just curious where you think things are going and what analytics professionals should be thinking about right now.
absolutely. So I think that there might be two or three components. The When it comes down to AI, one of the other things that I like to think about, actually, no, it fits in. It's quantity versus quality. It's that forklift versus the curl. If and I actually think that I heard this one on Hard Fork as well. If you are a bad coder, AI is not going to fix that. It's you can't vibe code your way through everything. It's not the way it works. And I think that the reason I'm thinking about it is because they did a study at a science organization that puts out patents, and the people that were producing the most patents did so just more quickly, and the people that were putting out fewer patents just did so more quickly. But the relative position that they were in and the quality of those patents and the amount of revising they needed to do stayed relatively the same. And they actually found that the folks that were not as productive or efficient or skilled at putting together the patents, they were missing out on the practice that would help them get from point A to point B. And so it was kind of taking the thought work out of it and then leaving them, it was doing the fun part, doing the thinking, and then leaving them with the final result.
Sure.
And so I think that that's one thing that to really keep in mind, that AI will help you with quantity and maybe with a first sketch, but you should really be diving into it and trying to write it yourself, or editing it yourself. Sometimes I'm on the front end and I write the code myself, or I'm looking at the code base trying to understand something and I'll rewrite it myself, or maybe I'm starting from scratch. And so I ask it for something and then I will update it. But the fine points is that you still need to be putting your hands into the system and trying to fine tune things the way that you do that best. But when it comes down to maybe the non-AI related things that people need to be thinking about, and things that I've been thinking about myself and trying to, cross the hurdle from senior data analyst to senior data analyst 2, or to maybe even analytics lead at some point in 5 years, it's going to be communication. So being able to lead your meetings, give a presentation kind of talk, kind of having a strategy session with people across the business. That's going to be a big one. And then industry domain knowledge. I've worked in Goldman Sachs, I've worked in private equity, I've worked in tech, I've worked in compensation, but I have not worked in most of these industries for a long time. I've worked with the skill set for a long time. And that's the thing that is able to help me get over the hump when I'm applying for a senior data analyst kind of role. But if you want to move into the team lead kind of role or the manager kind of roles, or maybe just be a high level individual contributor, you are going to need domain knowledge and the ability to communicate your findings to other people fairly independently. Those two things cannot be AI'd. It can't be. It's going to require the skill of consensus building, rapport building, and quickly getting to the point, which I am still working on. But we are all still working on something.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really good point. And in terms of presentations that I've seen of, when new data products are rolled out, or, where you may have whether it's an analyst or not, sharing insights in a deck or whatever, very rarely, if ever, are those AI driven presentations or demos or whatever. It's a person giving them live, right? And there's definitely some art and science to presenting, but I think that there's a lot of science to it, and there's a lot of components to it that you can learn on your own. And I'm curious, from your perspective, is this something, this speaking, presenting data, things like that, is this something that your folks that you coach ask about, and do you have recommendations for how they can develop that skill set? Because I think many analysts kind of they are really good with diving into the technical work, and maybe the presentation is secondary. Not always. I mean, some are really good naturally at it, but what's your kind of take on that? And what do you recommend to folks to develop that skill set?
I wish people would come to me and ask that question.
It's more you being proactive and recommending that they invest in that. Is that right? Or
that's the thing.
Okay.
No, they are usually coming to me at the time that they are looking for the job. And so that skill usually is, how do I test better? What should I expect in the interview process? Should I be doing a project right now? People rarely ever come to find me when they are fully employed, possibly if they are looking for their next thing and they don't like what they're doing right now.
Gotcha.
But even that is usually from compensation. I have advised a handful of people, maybe less than a handful of people, that's just transparency. Or that they are managers and they're looking for advice on maybe making it to a higher level manager. But more often than not, they're not coming for those skills. If I was going to give someone advice on that, though, this is a perfect opportunity. If I
Right.
was going to give somebody advice on presenting better and putting together presentations, I would say that you need to put yourself out there. If it's on the desk, not everybody needs to be a content creator. So in your day job or on LinkedIn, on your own slice of the internet, I would say put together a slide deck. Do it in Google Docs or Google Sheets. Um, you can grab the data from somewhere public, put together a slide deck. If you want to set up your phone and talk through the findings, play it back for yourself. See how you come off to you, and that can be an internal thing that you only have to show to yourself. And with this, you can time yourself. You can figure out your pacing. You can figure out where your ums and ahs are at. You can figure out how to bullet point things. And that's all things that you can do in the comfort of your own home if you are what honestly a lot of tech people are, which they may not want to be out in front in public, and that's okay. If you're okay with taking that next step, which I think has really helped me, I would say that you want to put that work in public. Allow people to comment on it. Someone will message you and say you misspelled something, and it will stick in your head for 3 weeks, but it'll be in your mind to double check things.
Right.
Every single time, or maybe double check it out loud or run it by someone else before you share it. And those tiny threads here and there, you start to tie those things together into like a very finely crafted technique or finely crafted practice. And so doing those independent projects yourself, putting together a really solid README on GitHub, and then trying to summarize that even more for a LinkedIn post. Those things are getting people to buy in, talk about your work. If you can do that independently on the internet, where no one is getting paid to read your stuff, then I think that you have a much better chance of doing that in a meeting where everyone in that room is paid to pay attention to the thing that you're doing. But those are some of the pieces of advice I would give people. Create something and create it independently, and then go on and share that with other people. I think that's the best advice I can give you. Nothing prepares you for it like doing it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think back to even when I first started posting myself on LinkedIn, I would say that um, I was still at a point in time where I hadn't done anywhere near as much speaking as I've done now in recent years. And I think that it was definitely like, it just took some courage to publish my work out there and kind of get comfortable with other people seeing my unique thoughts on things, or my own work in the field and things like that. And I think it was something that I had to get over, but that helped me, as I, in tandem with that, started to say yes to more speaking engagements, like internally at my organization or doing things externally. Like, I think it was a snowball effect between those two things: producing content, putting it out there, getting comfortable with people commenting on it, and then also doing some speaking. And it just took kind of taking that step forward and getting started with it, until I started creating content and saying yes to speaking. For the first 5 years that I was in the field, I hardly did anything in terms of speaking internally or externally. So love the advice there for sure. And it's interesting because we have a unique opportunity to put our work out in front of the world today that we really didn't have many years ago, and I've found that especially in the data field, I think people are just appreciative when you share knowledge or put yourself out there. I think it's a pretty collaborative and forgiving field. I think it just takes taking that step, having the courage to do it, and I think you'll get comfortable rather quickly. But that's my perspective.
It also helps you just not make it about you. I mean, like, you put a lot of thought and care into your work, and then you get feedback on it, and it can be really hard for people to take feedback on the work. Either because they're super invested in it or because they tried really hard. But for one reason or another, I do think that making a project, putting it out, whether it's a small post that's just the thing that you learned yesterday, or something that you spent the last 6 months trying to prepare for an audience, just doing it more often really does desensitize you and honestly trains you to take that feedback and say, okay, let's make it about the work. I'm going to share this work. It's not about me. It's about the thing we're trying to accomplish, the thing we're trying to learn. And then honestly, I think that that's one of the pieces also that I think helps you get to the next level of your career, being able to take feedback well. And it's not really about you. It's about the work, and then having a positive attitude about that process. it's kind of hard to be frustrated with someone that says, okay, I hear you. I'm going to go do the thing that you just told me to do. And then you go to them do it and you're like,
yeah,
okay, all I really have to do is give them a nudge in the right direction. I kind of like that. Like, it's kind of hard to be mad at that person. Even if they only take one step a day, it's kind of hard to be mad at that person unless you need them a lot further on. And then that's a statement about whether or not you hired the right person. But that's not really about you.
And have you found that for yourself personally, that the content creation, posting on LinkedIn or social media, that it has helped you build your network? Has that accelerated your network development?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have, I think, maybe 9,000 followers at the moment. It's, could I call each and every one of those people? Maybe not. But
Right.
I do think that it has helped in the amount of exposure that I've gotten to different people doing things interesting in an interesting way. I just met someone that is a data analyst at a college. One of my teammates went off to work for one of the justice departments in, I think, in like one of the coastal cities. It's not California. Okay. Maybe it's New York. Maybe it's somewhere near Massachusetts. But like, people are doing really interesting things, and the networking has ultimately helped me meet people doing those things. And I don't actually need a job from them when I am meeting them. Maybe I see a cool job on LinkedIn or on one of the other job boards, and I'm not looking at the time, but I still go through the process. And so I found the job, I'm not applying. I will reach out to that person and say, hey, I was doing my research on LinkedIn. I came across your page. I'm not applying, but just wanted to meet someone in the field. I did that pretty recently. And it's like a data analyst for a judge out of like Sacramento, and they're doing justice and like justice-oriented work. I love tech for social good. I'm very happy with my current employer doing healthcare-oriented work. And so I just wanted to meet the people, and we connected, and that's enough. But I think content creating has helped accelerate it by leaps and bounds that I otherwise would not have. It also has helped me flesh out a few thoughts, in which case I think that's been very helpful as well. I don't think that I would have this stuff to share unless I wrote it, shared it with people, and then people told me how it did or did not work for them, which is why I trusted enough to be able to tell other people in venues like this.
Interesting. Cool. So we've talked a little bit about your coaching and mentoring that you do. I believe you do most of this through a platform called TopMate. Is that correct?
Indeed, I do.
Okay, cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about what types of things you offer on TopMate?
Absolutely. So when I first started, I was offering kind of the same things that I needed from maybe like a year or two before that. And so I wanted to go over resumes. I wanted to go over LinkedIn. And I wanted to go over generally the kind of way that I approached careers. And so I like to ask myself, do I see myself in this industry, at this company, on this team, and in this role? Location comes into play, and compensation definitely come into play. But if the other things aren't addressed, then it's definitely going to be a problem. And so I was kind of giving that advice to other people. At this moment, I've tried to get away from sales and tried to get more towards service. The average person in the United States will have about 12 jobs throughout the course of their career. Now, if that's going to be the case, then I want to join them at hopefully one of the earlier stages, and then manage and then support them and be something of a concierge and someone that's helpful and an advisor as they're on the job and then as they're looking for the next job.
Sure.
But I'm honestly giving people the same advice that I would hope that I wish I had gotten earlier in my own career. And so that's kind of what I tried to offer to other people. Some of the organizations that I've been a part of, not Blue Labs, which is my current employer, but Blue Bonnet, they help progressive down ballot progressive campaigns and nonprofits. And when I got into that program, people wanted to talk to me about tech for social good or political data. And so I gave them advice about that and how to volunteer and how to make volunteering opportunities. When I interned with an organization called Ballotpedia, I served as a fellow and doing a lot of data entry right before the last election. People wanted to talk again about tech for social good. And so I gave them that advice. And when people wanted to apply to household name oriented companies like Netflix, I had to tell them that was one of the hardest interview processes that I've ever gone through in my entire life. But it did make me a better job candidate for every
Sure.
other job
Right.
I've applied to since, because now I know what it means to go 10 toes down, 0 to 100 from the beginning to the end, for that. But so I've always just tried to offer people the advice that has worked for me, and then told them explicitly when something did not work for me. I have tried a 2-page resume. I have tried a 3-page resume. Those things don't really get that much traction.
Mm-hmm.
I do loathe that rule that it can only be 1 page for anybody that has less than a decade of experience, is not a manager, or does not have a master's degree. But that has been very true for me. Anything over 1-page resume does not work. That's just one of many examples of things that has not worked for me. But
Mm-hmm.
I try to give people the advice that has worked for me in my recent history. And I kind of make it a rule. I try not to advise people that are further along in one avenue or another. So people that are coming to me wanting to talk about a master's program, I will give them advice about how I have or have not decided on a master's program. And people that are coming out of a master's program looking for a job, a full-time opportunity, I will give them advice on those things. But I do not advise folks on things. I do my best not to advise them on things that I have not either tried to do myself, or I have not counseled someone into success before.
And I can say too, for those listening, that I've checked out Isaac on TopMate, and he's very highly reviewed. And there's some really great testimonials out there to his services. So definitely worthwhile to check that out. We're going to put the link to Isaac's TopMate page down in the show notes. Also, is LinkedIn a good way to get in touch with you, or what's a good way for folks to follow your content and reach out to you if they want to?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with me and also to follow my work. That's where everything else branches out from.
Cool. Awesome. Very cool. Well, we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes too. So if you want to take a look at Isaac's services on TopMate, or also follow him on LinkedIn and get in touch with them there, we'll put that link in the show notes too. But this has been a great conversation. It's been fun meeting you. I know we've interacted on LinkedIn a bit, but it's great to be able to have the pre-call and this podcast episode with you. So thanks so much for doing this, Isaac.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, take care. And we'll see everybody back next week for our next episode. Thanks, Isaac.
Absolutely.